The sky above Novaera changed from bright blue to dark gray as strange ships appeared. No one on the colony had seen anything like this before. 5 million people were going about their normal day when everything suddenly changed. In the main control building, Governor Hannah Park watched the large screens with worry in her eyes. The screens showed many alien ships moving to positions above the biggest cities. "Have they answered our messages?" she asked, keeping her voice calm even though she was afraid. Todd Kim, who was in charge of communications, looked up from his station. "No, Governor. They can hear us, but they are not talking back." Governor Park pressed her lips together. Novaera was Earth's most important colony, with the most advanced technology and best defenses, but they had never faced anything like this. "Keep trying," she ordered, "and alert all defense ships to prepare for possible trouble." Outside the command center windows, people were starting to notice the dark shapes in the sky. Some stopped to point upward. Others, sensing danger, hurried toward homes and public shelters. Without any warning, bright beams of energy shot down from the alien ships. The first hits targeted the colony's shield generators. Alarms screamed through the command center as screens flashed red. "Shields failing," shouted the defense officer. "Direct hits on all main generator stations." Governor Park gripped the edge of the command table. "Launch all defense ships. Get our people to safety." Novaera had 30 ships for protection. They were good ships with trained crews, but as they rose to meet the attackers, it became clear they were outmatched. The alien vessels moved faster, and their weapons cut through Novaera's ships easily. The command center shook as explosions hit nearby buildings. Ceiling panels fell, and lights flickered. Lieutenant Commander Jun Lee worked at the quantum communication station, while everyone else focused on the attack. Blood ran down his face from a cut on his forehead, but he didn't stop working. This station was special. It could send messages instantly across space using quantum technology. If they could get a message to Earth, help might come. Another explosion rocked the building. Governor Park stumbled across the room to Lee's station. "Is it ready?" she asked, steadying herself against his chair. Lee nodded, his fingers flying across the controls. "Message encoded and ready to send, Governor." Around them, the situation was getting worse. Half the screens were dead. Reports of destruction came from all major cities. "Send it," Park ordered. "Make sure Earth knows exactly what happened here." Lee pressed the final sequence. The quantum beacon activated, sending its desperate message across the vast distance to Earth. Just as the confirmation light blinked green, the power in the command center failed completely. Emergency lights cast an eerie red glow over the frightened faces. "Message sent," Lee confirmed. Governor Park put a hand on his shoulder. "Good work. Now we need to evacuate." They never made it out of the building. A direct hit collapsed the eastern wall. Governor Park was killed instantly when a support beam crushed her. Lee was knocked unconscious. Hours later, he woke in darkness. The weight of debris pressed down on him, leaving only a small pocket of air. His head throbbed, and he couldn't feel his left leg. "Hello," he called weakly. "Anyone there?" To his surprise, he heard movement, then saw light as someone shifted rubble away. "Found a live one," a voice called out. More debris moved, and Lee saw a face peering down at him. It was Sergeant Kwan from the Colonial Marine Force. "Commander Lee, you're alive." The Marine looked surprised but relieved. With careful work, the Marines pulled Lee from the rubble. His leg was badly broken, and he had lost a lot of blood. "The Governor?" Lee asked as they carried him to a makeshift medical area. Sergeant Kwan just shook his head. Lee closed his eyes against the pain and grief. "How bad is it?" "Bad," Kwan said simply. "They've landed troops now, taking control of everything, killing anyone who fights back." From his stretcher, Lee could see the once beautiful colony capital in ruins. Fires burned everywhere. The alien ships still hung in the sky, but smaller craft now moved between them and the ground. How many of us left? Lee asked. About 200 gathered here, Quan explained. More hiding elsewhere, I hope. We're heading to the old mining tunnels in the eastern mountains. They're shielded against scans. As a medic worked on his leg, Lee thought about what to do next. The message had gone to Earth. Help might come, but it would take time. Until then, they needed to survive. We need to gather information, Lee said. Learn about these attackers. Find their weaknesses. Sergeant Quan nodded. Some of us were thinking the same. We've collected weapons from our fallen soldiers. That night, as they moved carefully through the ruins toward the mountains, Lee saw the full extent of the destruction. Beautiful buildings that had stood proudly just that morning were now smoking piles of rubble. Bodies lay in the streets. The aliens patrolled in groups, their armor unlike anything Lee had seen before. One patrol came too close to their position. Everyone froze, hiding behind a collapsed wall. An alien soldier stepped just meters away, scanning the area. Its helmet had 4 eye slots, and its body was taller and thinner than a human's. Lee held his breath until the patrol moved on. We'll remember this, he whispered to himself, and we'll make them pay. Over the following weeks, Lee's leg healed, though he walked with a limp. The survivors established a hidden base in the mining tunnels. They gathered weapons, medicine, and food. More survivors found their way to them. Lee became their leader, though he hadn't asked for the job. His experience as a command officer made him the natural choice. He organized them into teams, some to gather supplies, others to collect information about the enemy, now identified as the Galactic Concordat from intercepted communications. They think they've won, Lee told his people 3 months after the attack. But they don't understand humans. We don't surrender. We adapt. We fight back. And when Earth receives our message, they'll learn what it means to awaken humanity's fury. In the darkness of their hidden base, the survivors nodded grimly. They would be ready when help came. Until then, they would be the thorn in the Concordat's side, a constant reminder that taking Novaera had been a terrible mistake. The quantum message from Novaera arrived on Earth at exactly 3:27 a.m. Greenwich time. Within minutes, the highest alert protocols activated across all Earth defense networks. Admiral Da Yoon was woken from a light sleep in her quarters at the Seoul Command Center. Admiral, we've received an emergency quantum transmission from Novaera, her aide said, voice tight with concern. It's bad. Admiral Yoon dressed quickly in her uniform and hurried to the command center. The message played on the main screen, showing Governor Park's frightened face, the sounds of explosions in the background. The transmission cut off abruptly mid-sentence. When did this arrive? Yoon asked. Just 17 minutes ago, her aide replied. We've tried to establish contact but received no response. Satellite feeds show nothing. They've all gone dark. Yoon's face hardened. Alert the Defense Council. Emergency session in 1 hour. For 3 days, Yoon worked without rest. Her team gathered all available data, checked on other colonies, and prepared their assessment. By the time she stood before the United Earth Defense Council, dark circles rimmed her eyes, but her blue uniform remained perfectly pressed, her posture military straight. The 12 members of the council watched grimly as the Novaera message played again on the large screen in the chamber center. The attack was methodical and without provocation, Admiral Yoon concluded when the playback ended. Based on the silence from our other outer colonies, we believe this wasn't an isolated incident. Council Chairwoman Ji Sun, a small woman with steel-gray hair and piercing eyes, leaned forward in her seat. You've been warning us for years that first contact might not be peaceful. It seems you were right, Admiral. Yoon nodded once, her expression grim. I take no pleasure in that, Madam Chairwoman. But we do have options. She pressed a button on her wrist device. The central display changed to show a classified schematic. Security officers moved to ensure the room remained secure. For 20 years, we've been building, preparing. Operation Guardian has established hidden shipyards throughout the solar system. The display showed massive construction facilities, hidden within hollowed-out asteroids, others concealed in the thick atmospheres of gas giants, and more buried deep beneath the surfaces of various moons. Several council members gasped. Defense Minister Sung Han stood up from his seat for a better view. "These facilities exist," he asked in disbelief. "I thought they were theoretical." "Very real, Minister," Admiral Yoon replied. "Built in absolute secrecy, with crews rotating on 5-year silent deployments. We have 700,000 warships in various stages of readiness. With full activation, we can deploy in 2 weeks." The council chamber fell completely silent. The number was almost incomprehensible. Earth's known public fleet consisted of just 10,000 vessels. "The sleeping giant protocol," murmured Defense Minister Sung Han, sinking back into his seat. "I voted against it as excessive when it was proposed. I'm glad I was outvoted." Yoon brought up new images showing different classes of warships. "These aren't simple patrol craft. They include heavy destroyers, carriers, stealth corvettes, and planetary assault vessels. Each incorporates our most advanced technology, some of which has never been publicly revealed." Councillor Mun raised his hand. "The resource allocation for this, how was it hidden from public budgets?" "Project costs were distributed across thousands of classified line items," Yoon explained. "The ships were built modularly, often disguised as research stations or mining operations." Chairwoman Ji Sun rose from her seat, her small frame somehow filling the room with authority. "Admiral, before we vote, I need to know one thing. Even with these ships, what are our chances against an enemy that could so easily destroy Novaera?" Admiral Yoon met her gaze directly. "Novaera had 30 defense ships, Madam Chairwoman. We will send 23,000 times that number. Our ships have technologies even our colonies don't know about. Is victory certain? No, but we will make them regret attacking humanity." The vote to activate the Sleeping Giant Protocol was unanimous. Within hours, coded quantum signals transmitted throughout the solar system. In the frozen mines of Mercury, beneath the clouds of Venus, hidden in Jupiter's great red spot, buried in Saturn's rings, and concealed in thousands of asteroids, lights came on in facilities that had waited patiently for this day. Admiral Yoon stood on the bridge of her command ship, the UES Vengeance, as it emerged from its hiding place, inside a hollowed-out section of Mars moon Phobos. All around, other massive vessels appeared as hidden bay doors opened across the moon's surface. "Admiral," her second-in-command reported, "all solar system sectors confirm activation. Production facilities are at full capacity, completing the final ships. Training simulations have begun for all crews." Yoon nodded. "And the special weapons systems? The Sunfire cannons are operational on all heavy destroyers. The phase shift engines are ready for deployment tests." For the next 10 days, Earth became a planet of singular purpose. Civilian scientists were briefed on classified technologies and tasked with improvements. Manufacturing centers worked around the clock producing munitions. Military personnel from all Earth nations transferred to their assigned vessels. Admiral Yoon barely slept. When she did, she saw Novaera burning in her dreams. On the 11th day of preparations, she received another disturbing report. "Admiral," her intelligence officer said, "we've analyzed the attack pattern used at Novaera. It matches historical human tactics exactly, specifically those used in the Battle of Midway and Operation Desert Storm. They studied us before attacking." Yoon considered this. "Then they know our past, but they don't know what we've become." On the final briefing before launch, she addressed the fleet commanders gathered in the Vengeance's war room. "The enemy believes they have measured humanity's strength and found it wanting," she told them. "They attacked our people thinking we would be easy prey. They will learn their mistake. When our 700,000 ships arrive, they will understand they haven't awakened a simple colony species. They've awakened a giant that has been preparing for this moment for generations." The oldest commander in the room, Admiral Kim, who had supported the sleeping giant protocol from its inception 30 years earlier, raised his hand. I've waited my whole career for this moment, never truly believing it would come. I just need to know, are we going to win this? Admiral Yoon's eyes hardened as she looked around the room. We are not going to just win, Admiral Kim. We are going to redefine what the galaxy understands about humanity. And when we're done, no species will ever think of attacking us again. The first wave of 150,000 warships departed Earth orbit 3 days later, their massive engines creating a light show visible to the naked eye from the planet's surface. Humanity had answered the call to war. The stars looked like streaks of light through the viewports of the UES Vengeance as it led the first wave of Earth's fleet toward Novaera. Admiral Yoon stood on the command deck, watching the tactical display that showed all 150,000 ships in perfect formation behind her flagship. Second wave reports successful departure from Mars orbital yards, reported her communications officer. Third wave will launch in 6 hours. Yoon nodded. The massive fleet moved in carefully planned waves, using the new fold space engines that bent the fabric of spacetime. These engines were one of humanity's most closely guarded secrets. They had never been installed on colony ships or commercial vessels. Only these warships, built in secret, carried them. How long until we reach Novaera? Yoon asked. At current speed, 2 months and 3 days, answered the navigation officer. Much faster than the aliens would expect, if they're watching for us. The journey gave them time to prepare. Every day, officers and crew trained in combat simulations. Engineers fine-tuned weapons systems. Doctors prepared medical facilities. And in the intelligence center deep within the Vengeance, specialists worked day and night to learn about their enemy. Captain Hyun Park commanded the scout ship Pathfinder, which traveled ahead of the main fleet. His ship was small and fast, designed to be hard to detect. The Pathfinder's job was to gather information about the enemy before the main fleet arrived. Keep us just outside their sensor range. Park ordered his pilot as they approached an area of space that showed unusual energy readings. The Pathfinder sensors detected a group of large ships moving slowly through space. They didn't look like warships. They moved in a straight line with minimal defensive systems active. Supply ships, Park said, studying the readings. They're carrying raw materials, probably fuel and weapons for the forces at Novaera. His second-in-command nodded. Should we attack? Park shook his head. No. We're here to gather information, not alert them to our presence. He pointed to the display. Record everything. Map their course. Note their defenses. For 3 days, the Pathfinder followed the convoy at a safe distance. They recorded the ship's communication patterns and mapped the exact route they followed. They're using a specific pathway through this sector, Park noted. See how they avoid these star systems. There must be a reason. When they had gathered enough data, Park sent an encrypted message back to Admiral Yoon. We've mapped their approach vector, he reported over the secure channel. Their supply lines are extended and vulnerable. They didn't expect a counterattack of this magnitude. On the Vengeance, Admiral Yoon received this report with great interest. Good work, Captain. Continue your reconnaissance but maintain absolute stealth. We don't want them to know we're coming. Meanwhile, in the intelligence center, Officer Min Lee made a breakthrough in decoding the alien communications. She worked with a team of linguists and code breakers, analyzing messages intercepted from Novaera and other points in space where alien transmissions had been detected. After weeks of work, she requested an urgent meeting with Admiral Yoon and the senior command staff. The meeting room was crowded with 20 officers when Lee presented her findings. She displayed translation matrices and communication patterns on the main screen. We've identified the attackers as the Galactic HFY, she began. Based on decoded communications, they are not a single species but a coalition of 27 different alien civilizations. The officers murmured among themselves at this news. Why did they attack us? Asked Admiral Yoon directly. Lee changed the display to show intercepted strategic communications between Concordat commanders. Their attack was preventative. They've been watching Earth and our colonies for decades. They fear our rapid technological advancement. Their leadership determined humanity would eventually threaten their dominance if allowed to expand unchecked. So they decided to crush us before we became too strong, said one of the generals. Exactly, Lee confirmed. They targeted Novaera first because it was our most advanced colony. They planned to destroy it, then move inward through our territory, eventually reaching Earth itself. Admiral Yoon's expression hardened as she absorbed this information. They made a grave miscalculation. As the journey continued, the fleet received more reports from Captain Park's Pathfinder and other scout ships. They mapped Concordat patrols, supply routes, and defensive positions. All this data helped Admiral Yoon refine her battle plan. One evening, while most of the crew slept, Yoon stood alone in her private observation room, looking out at the stars. The door chimed, and her aide entered. "You should rest, Admiral," he said. "We still have 3 weeks of travel ahead." Yoon didn't turn from the viewport. "I keep thinking about the people of Novaera. How many survived? Are they still fighting? Will we arrive in time to save them?" "We're moving as fast as possible," her aide assured her. "I know, but I also keep wondering if we could have prevented this. If we had revealed our military strength earlier, would the Concordat have dared attack us? Or would they have built up their forces even more before striking?" Her aide countered. "There's no way to know." Yoon nodded. "You're right. What matters now is what we do next." She turned from the stars. "Tell the battle group commanders I want to meet tomorrow. It's time to finalize our approach strategy." The next day, Yoon met with the 5 commanders who would each lead a battle group of the fleet. They gathered around a holographic display of the Novaera system. "We'll enter the system in 5 separate groups," Yoon explained. "Battle Group Alpha, which I will lead, will approach directly from Earth's vector. The Concordat will expect this approach if they detect us." She gestured to the display, which showed ships moving into position. Battle Groups Beta and Gamma will fold space to these positions on the system flanks. Groups Delta and Echo will position themselves behind Novaera's sun and use its radiation to mask their approach. When the signal is given, all groups will attack simultaneously. Commander Sung nodded appreciatively. "A complete encirclement. They won't be able to retreat." "Exactly," said Yoon. "We're not just going to defeat them. We're going to trap them." As the fleet neared Novaera, tension grew among the crews. Many had family or friends on the colony. Others had never seen combat before. Training intensified. Weapons were checked and rechecked. In her quarters, Admiral Yoon recorded a message to be played to all ships before battle. "Soldiers of Earth," she said, looking directly into the camera, "we approach the moment that will define humanity's place in the galaxy. The enemy believed us weak. They thought they could destroy our colonies, kill our people, and that we would accept defeat. They were wrong. Each of you represents the best of humanity. Our strength, our intelligence, our determination. Tomorrow, we will show the Galactic Concordat exactly who they chose to attack. Tomorrow, we teach them why humanity should have been feared, not dismissed." One day before arrival, Captain Park's Pathfinder sent its final report before rejoining the fleet. It confirmed that the Concordat forces remained in position around Novaera, apparently unaware of what was coming. "All ships, prepare for fold space jump to battle positions," Admiral Yoon ordered. "The time for waiting is over. Now we fight." The flash of light marked the arrival of Battle Group Alpha at the edge of the Novaera system. One moment, space was empty. The next, 150,000 human warships appeared in perfect formation. On the bridge of the UES Vengeance, Admiral Yoon looked at the tactical display showing the Concordat forces around Novaera. "They've noticed us," said her second-in-command. "Their ships are moving to defensive positions." The Concordat had 3,000 ships around the planet. Under normal circumstances, this would be an overwhelming force. But today, they faced something they had never expected: Captain Sukang's voice came through on the command channel from his ship, the heavy cruiser Thunderbolt. "Admiral, scans show they've established orbital platforms. Ground installations as well. They're digging in for permanent occupation." Yoon's face showed no emotion, but her voice was cold with anger. "They think Novaera is already theirs." She opened a channel to all ships. "Initiate Operation Typhoon. All ships to combat readiness." Throughout the human fleet, crews rushed to battle stations, weapons powered up. Shield generators hummed to life. Fighter craft prepared for launch. Deep in the mining tunnels on Novaera's surface, Commander Jun Lee received a coded message on a hidden receiver. After months of fighting from the shadows, the resistance fighters could hardly believe what they were hearing. "Earth sent a fleet?" asked Sergeant Quan, his eyes wide. "They're here now." Lee nodded, hope visible on his face for the first time in months. "And they need our help." He quickly explained the plan to his team. "We need to take out the main power hub that supplies the Concordat's ground-based defense systems." 20 resistance fighters moved through underground tunnels toward the power hub. They wore mismatched armor collected from fallen soldiers and carried weapons taken from dead Concordat troops. They had become experts at moving unseen. When they reached the massive power hub, Lee directed his people to place explosive charges at key points. Concordat guards patrolled the area, but the resistance fighters had studied their patterns. Charges set, Lee whispered into his communicator, "Ready on your mark, Admiral." In space, the human fleet advanced toward Novaera. The Concordat commanders, at first confused by the unexpected arrival, now scrambled to meet the threat. They sent 1,000 ships to intercept Battle Group Alpha, believing it was Earth's entire force. Yoon allowed a small smile as she watched them take the bait. "Right on schedule. Signal Commander Lee." On the surface, Lee received the go signal. "Now," he ordered his team. They triggered the explosives simultaneously. The power hub erupted in a series of massive explosions. Immediately, the energy shields protecting the Concordat's ground-based weapon systems flickered and died. "Ground defenses offline," reported Yoon's tactical officer. "Now, Admiral, all ships engage," Yoon commanded. The space battle erupted with staggering violence. Human ships fired their main weapons in coordinated patterns. Though each human vessel was smaller than its Concordat counterpart, they moved in perfect groups, concentrating their fire. The Concordat ships responded with powerful energy weapons that cut through space. When these hit human ships, the ship's adaptive shields analyzed the energy pattern and adjusted to better absorb subsequent hits. A massive Concordat battleship approached the Vengeance, firing its main cannon. The energy beam struck the flagship's shields. "Shield holding at 80%, reported the defense officer, adapting to their frequency. "Return fire," ordered Yoon calmly. "All forward batteries." The Vengeance's weapons released a devastating barrage. The Concordat battleship's shields flared bright blue under the assault. As the first exchange of fire drew the Concordat forces toward Battle Group Alpha, the trap was ready to spring. Battle Groups Beta and Gamma. "Execute jump now," Yoon ordered. Suddenly, 280,000 more human ships appeared on either side of the Concordat fleet. The alien commanders, already struggling against the unexpected size of the first human force, now found themselves attacked from 3 directions. Concordat's Supreme Commander Tor Kelek stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. His 4 eyes blinked rapidly as tactical displays showed the human fleet's true size. "Impossible," he growled to his officers. "Their colony had only 30 ships. Where did they get such a force?" "Supreme Commander, we're detecting more fold space signatures," cried his sensor officer. Battle Groups Delta and Echo appeared from behind Novaera's sun, adding another 270,000 ships to the human fleet. The Concordat forces were now completely surrounded. "All ships, break and scatter," ordered Kelek. "Retreat to Rally Point Zenith." But there was nowhere to run. Human ships blocked every escape route. their weapons firing in concentrated patterns that overwhelmed Concordat shields. Captain Hyun Park, now commanding a battle group of 5,000 ships, recognized the Eternal Dominion from intelligence reports. "Target the Concordat flagship," he ordered his group. "All batteries, concentrated fire." Thousands of weapons locked onto the massive alien vessel. The first volley struck its shields, causing them to flare brightly. The second volley weakened them further. By the third, sections of the shield began to fail. "Their shield pattern is analyzed and locked," reported Park's weapons officer, targeting their main engines. The next barrage hit with surgical precision. The Eternal Dominion's propulsion system exploded in a brilliant flash. The mighty flagship drifted helplessly. On Novaera's surface, Commander Lee and his fighters watched the battle through the broken roof of an abandoned building. The night sky lit up with explosions that looked like new stars being born. "I never thought I'd see this day," Sergeant Kwan said quietly. Lee nodded. "After months of hiding, fighting just to survive, Earth didn't forget us." The battle raged for hours. Concordat ships fought fiercely, their technology powerful but overwhelmed by the sheer numbers and coordination of the human fleet. Human losses mounted, nearly 20,000 ships destroyed. But the outcome was never in doubt. Admiral Yoon received regular updates on the battle's progress. "Fleet status," she asked her tactical officer. "Concordat forces reduced to 23% of original strength. Their formation has collapsed. Many ships are trying to surrender." Yoon nodded. "Accept surrenders from any ship that powers down weapons. But the Eternal Dominion is to be boarded. I want Supreme Commander Kalak alive." A team of human Marines boarded the crippled Concordat flagship. They fought their way through the alien corridors, eventually reaching the bridge. Supreme Commander Kalak, his large frame slumped in his command chair, looked up as they entered. "I did not believe," he said in halting human language, "did not believe your kind capable of this response." The Marine captain activated his communicator. "Admiral, we have secured the Concordat commander." On the Vengeance, Admiral Yoon allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. "Tell him I'll speak with him soon. There is much he needs to understand about humanity." As the battle wound down, the human fleet moved into positions around Novaera. Dropships descended to the surface, bringing supplies and troops to help the colonists. Commander Lee met the first ships that landed near the resistance base. After months of fighting from the shadows, he stood proudly in the open air as Earth forces arrived. The battle for Novaera was over. The war with the Galactic Concordat had just begun. The battle for Novaera ended after 3 days. The space around the planet was filled with the broken pieces of ships from both sides. Admiral Yoon looked out from the main window of the Vengeance at what remained of the once mighty Concordat fleet. Most of their ships were destroyed. A few had surrendered. The rest had run away. "How many ships did we lose?" Yoon asked her second in command. "Nearly 50,000 destroyed or too damaged to repair," he replied. "But we won. Novaera is ours again." Yoon nodded. The cost had been high, but the victory was complete. Now came the harder part. "Open a channel to the Concordat High Council," she ordered. "They will answer now." The communication officer worked at his station. Soon, a large hologram appeared in the center of the bridge. It showed an alien with gray skin and 4 blinking eyes. This was High Counselor Valmek, the leader of the Galactic Concordat. "Greetings, Admiral," the alien said. His voice sounded forced, as if he didn't want to be speaking to her. "Your attack on our colony was unprovoked," Admiral Yoon stated firmly. "Millions of our people died needlessly because your Concordat feared what humanity might become." Valmek's eyes blinked faster. "You do not understand your place in the greater galaxy," he said. "There are powers and protocols. We understand precisely our place." Yoon interrupted. "We are claiming it now. Novaera will be rebuilt. Your people will pay for the damage. And humanity will be recognized as a sovereign power with all the rights that come with it." Valmek seemed about to argue, but then looked at something off-screen. Perhaps a report of how completely his forces had been defeated. "We are willing to discuss terms," he said finally. The negotiations took weeks. Earth sent its best diplomats to join Admiral Yoon. The Concordat sent representatives from several of their member species. They met on a neutral space station positioned between Novaera and the nearest Concordat world. During these talks, humans learned much about the wider galaxy. The Concordat was powerful, but it was only one of several major powers in this part of space. Some of these other powers had advised against attacking humanity, suggesting peaceful contact instead. "Your species develops technology very quickly," explained one Concordat diplomat during a private meeting with Yoon. "Some of our oldest members saw this as a threat. So they decided to destroy us before talking to us," Yoon asked. The diplomat lowered all four of his eyes. Yes, it was a mistake. After much discussion, a peace agreement was signed. The Concordat would pay to help rebuild Novaera. They would recognize humanity's right to its existing colonies. Both sides would establish a neutral zone around Novaera, monitored by ships from both fleets. On the surface of Novaera, the rebuilding began. The once beautiful colony had been badly damaged, but people worked hard to restore it. Earth sent supplies and more colonists to replace those who had been lost. Commander Lee, his legs still causing him to limp, walked through the main street of the capital city with Admiral Yoon. Construction crews worked on new buildings. Children played in newly created parks. Life was returning. "I wasn't sure I would ever see this," Lee admitted. "During those first months after the attack, I thought we might be the last humans left alive." Yoon nodded. "Your resistance fighters helped save this colony. Without your attack on their power hub during the battle, we might have lost many more ships." They stopped at a high point overlooking the city. In the distance, they could see the memorial being built to honor those who died in the attack. Beyond that, new defense installations were being constructed, stronger than before. "They'll come again, won't they?" Lee asked quietly. Admiral Yoon looked at the sky, where both human and Concordat ships could be seen patrolling. "Perhaps, but not as conquerors next time. Perhaps as equals, or at least as beings who recognize power when they see it." Lee sighed. "I hope so. I've seen enough war." "We all have," Yoon agreed. "But we've learned something important. We're not alone in this galaxy, and not everyone out there is friendly." That evening, Earth's Defense Council held a meeting to discuss the future. Some members wanted to build even more ships. Others suggested reaching out to other galactic powers who might be more friendly than the Concordat. "We should show our strength," said one general. "The 650,000 ships we still have should patrol all our colonies. But we should also show we're not aggressive," countered a diplomat. "The Concordat attacked because they feared us. We don't want others to make the same mistake." Admiral Yoon listened to all sides. When asked her opinion, she stood and looked around the table. "We've proven we can defend ourselves," she said. "Now we need to prove we can be good neighbors in this galaxy. That doesn't mean being weak. It means being wise." The council voted to maintain their fleet, but also to establish a diplomatic corps specifically trained for contact with alien civilizations. They would be ready for peace or war. 6 months after the battle, Novaera held a ceremony to officially reopen the colony. Representatives from Earth and, surprisingly, from the Concordat attended. As the sun set over the rebuilt city, Admiral Yoon stood with Commander Lee watching the stars appear. "Do you ever wonder what else is out there?" Lee asked. "All the time," replied Yoon. The Concordat mentioned at least 5 other major powers in this part of the galaxy alone. "Some might be better friends than the Concordat. Or worse enemies," Lee added. Yoon nodded. "That's why we keep our ships ready. But we also keep our hands extended in friendship." Above them, the stars seemed brighter somehow. Humanity had found its place among them, not just as explorers or colonists, but as a power to be respected. The cost had been high, but the future was wide open. Earth's 700,000 warships had answered the call when needed. They had proven that humanity would not be an easy target. And now, those same ships would help ensure that such a devastating attack would never happen again. The next chapter of human history would be written among the stars. And this time, humanity would help decide what that story would be.